my wife yelled as I lay motionless on the ground. Walk it off, stop being a baby, my wife's brother stood smirking while her sister accused me of ruining her birthday. But when the paramedic saw I couldn't move my legs, she immediately called for police backup. The MRI would reveal. Walk it off. Stop being a baby, my wife yelled as I lay motionless on the ground. My wife's brother stood smirking while her sister accused me of ruining her birthday. But when the paramedic saw I couldn't move my legs, she immediately called for police backup. The MRI would reveal. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately know you don't belong? That's exactly how I felt standing on Marissa's pool deck, watching the raindrops still clinging to the fancy outdoor furniture like they were scared to let go. Hell, I didn't blame them. I was scared to let go, too, but not of some overpriced patio chair. I was scared of what this whole damn party represented. The concrete under my work boots was slick, and I kept shuffling toward the edge of the pool area, trying to blend into the background like I always did at these family gatherings. My steel-toed boots felt completely out of place against all the designer sandals and boat shoes scattered around the deck. Everyone else looked like they'd stepped out of some country club catalog. And here I was in my wrinkled khakis and company polo, still smelling like the warehouse from my double shift that morning. Tracy was across the yard. And damn, if she didn't look right at home with her people. She had that laugh going, you know, the one where she throws her head back and shows off those perfect white teeth her daddy paid for. She was clutching some fancy cocktail that probably cost more than I made in a day, standing next to her brother Brent and sister Marissa like they were posing for a magazine spread. The golden children, all three of them with their perfect lives and perfect problems. I should have stayed home. Should have told Tracy I was too tired, too busy, too whatever. But you don't say no to the Hendersons when they're throwing a party. Not if you're married to one of them anyway. Not if you want to keep the peace in your own house. The party was in full swing around me. Kids splashing in the pool. Adults networking over wine and cheese that had names I couldn't pronounce. I recognized most of the faces from previous family gatherings. But recognition doesn't equal belonging. These people knew exactly what I was, Tracy's blue-collar husband who didn't quite fit their mold, the guy who fixed things and moved boxes while they moved money and made deals. I was minding my own business. Really, I was just standing there watching the water ripple in the pool, thinking about how much overtime I'd need to pull to afford the electric bill this month when I saw him coming. Brent, that swagger of his that screamed privilege and entitlement from 50 yards away. He had that look in his eyes, the same one he'd had since the day I married his sister. That look that said he was about to have some fun, and I was going to be the entertainment. Everett. His voice cut through the party chatter like a knife through butter. There's my favorite brother-in-law. Favorite and only. But who's counting? I forced a smile and gave him a nod. Hey, Brent. Hell of a party. You know what this party needs? He was grinning now. That shark-like smile that made my stomach twist. Some excitement. Some real fun. I could feel the eyes on us already. The other guests, sensing something was about to happen, turning to watch like we were the main event. This was how it always went with Brent. He needed an audience for his games, needed witnesses to his dominance. And I was always his favorite target. Come on, Everett, he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's show these people some real fun. I took a step back, my boots scraping against the wet concrete. I'm good, man. Really, just enjoying the party. But Brent wasn't taking no for an answer. He never did. That's when I felt his hand clamp down on my arm. Not friendly, not playful, but possessive, like I was his property to do with as he pleased. No, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to make a scene. Brent, I'm in my work clothes, man. I don't want to. Don't be such a buzzkill. Tracy's voice cut through my protests like she was scolding a child. She didn't even look up from her conversation, just waved her hand dismissively in my direction. It's Marissa's day, Everett. Stop being so damn dramatic. Dramatic. That was always her word for me when I tried to set boundaries. When I tried to say no to her family's idea of fun. When I didn't want to be the butt of their jokes or the target of their games. Dramatic. Marissa chimed in from across the deck, her voice sharp with irritation. Seriously, Everett, can you just go along with something for once? This is supposed to be my special day. The crowd was watching now. All of them waiting to see what would happen next. Waiting to see if I'd be a good sport or if I'd ruin the party with my drama. The pressure was suffocating, but it was familiar, too. This was how it always went in Tracy's family. You played along with their games or you were the problem. Brent's grip tightened on my arm. See, even the birthday girl wants you to have some fun. Come on, little brother. Little brother. I was 34 years old, but to Brent, I'd always be the little brother who needed to be put in his place. The outsider who needed reminding of where he stood in the family hierarchy. Brent, please, I tried one more time, but my voice was drowned out by his laughter and the encouraging calls from the crowd. Someone shouted, do it. Someone else was already pulling out their phone to record whatever was about to happen. That's when Brent spun me hard, like I was a toy, like I weighed nothing at all. The world tilted sideways and I felt my feet leave the ground. For a split second, I was airborne, completely at the mercy of momentum and gravity and Brent's idea of entertainment. I wasn't a child. I was a grown man with responsibilities and bills and a bad back from years of warehouse work. But in that moment, spinning through the air with the sound of laughter filling my ears, I felt as helpless as a kid being bullied on a playground. The edge of the pool was right behind me. I could see it rushing toward me as I spun. Could see the concrete steps that led down into the water. Hard, unforgiving concrete that didn't care about birthday parties or family dynamics or keeping the peace. This was supposed to be just a joke, right? Just Brent being Brent. Just family fun that I'd laugh about later. That's what Tracy would say afterward. What they'd all say, just harmless fun that went a little too far. But as I felt Brent's hands release me, as I felt myself falling backward toward those concrete steps, I knew this wasn't going to be funny at all. You ever have one of those moments where everything slows down like you're watching it happen to someone else? That's exactly what it felt like when Brent let go of me. 1 second I was spinning through the air like some kind of twisted carnival ride and the next I was watching myself fall backward in what felt like slow motion. My arms were flailing, trying to grab onto something, anything. But there was nothing but empty air and the sound of people laughing. The laughter was the worst part. Not the falling, not even the fear of what was coming, but hearing all these people finding my terror hilarious. Like my panic was the punchline to some joke I wasn't in on. I could see Tracy from the corner of my eye as I spun. Still holding that damn cocktail. Still wearing that expression like I was embarrassing her just by existing. Her lips were moving, probably complaining to whoever would listen about how I always had to make everything about me. Classic Tracy. Even when I was literally falling through the air, she made it about how it affected her. Time stretched like taffy as I stumbled mid-spin. My work boots trying to find purchase on the wet concrete, but finding nothing but slick surface and gravity pulling me down. My body was completely off balance. Arms windmilling uselessly as I realized with crystal clarity exactly where I was headed. The concrete steps. Jesus Christ. The concrete steps. I'd noticed them earlier when I was trying to stay out of everyone's way. 3 sharp-edged steps leading down into the shallow end of the pool. Expensive-looking stone, probably some fancy Italian marble that cost more than my truck. Beautiful to look at, but hard as hell, and completely unforgiving. My back hit those steps with a sound I'll never forget. Not a thud, not a splash, but a crack. A sharp, definitive crack that seemed to echo across the entire yard like a gunshot. The kind of sound that makes everyone stop talking, even if just for a second. But they didn't stop talking. They didn't even stop laughing. The pain was immediate and absolute. Not like when you bang your shin on a coffee table or stub your toe. This was different. This was my entire world suddenly narrowing down to one single point of agony that radiated out from my lower back like lightning. I tried to suck in air, but my lungs felt like they'd forgotten how to work. I was lying there on those damn steps, half in the pool, half out. My work shirt soaked through and clinging to my skin. The water was warm against my back, but I couldn't feel anything below my waist. Nothing. Like someone had just erased the bottom half of my body. Walk it off, Everett, Tracy's voice cut through the haze of pain and shock. She was actually shouting at me, her voice sharp with irritation and embarrassment. You're embarrassing us. Don't be such a baby. A baby? I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't breathe properly, and she was calling me a baby in front of all her friends and family. I tried to turn my head to look at her, try to make her understand that something was seriously wrong, but she wasn't even looking at me. She was looking at her guests, probably trying to gauge how much damage control she'd need to do. Marissa's voice joined in from somewhere near the patio. Of course, she said, her tone dripping with frustration. Of course, he pulls this drama on my birthday. My one special day. And he has to make it all about him. My one special day. Like I planned this. Like I'd asked Brent to grab me and throw me into her fancy pool steps just to steal her thunder. The absurdity of it would have been funny if I could feel anything below my waist. I tried to speak, tried to tell them that something was really wrong, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. I can't move my legs. The words hung in the air for a moment, but nobody seemed to hear them over the sound of their own complaints and excuses. Brent was somewhere behind me, probably trying to figure out how to spin this into another joke. The other guests were starting to drift back to their conversations. The entertainment apparently over. But then everything changed. Samantha, one of Marissa's friends, who I'd barely noticed before, suddenly appeared beside me. While everyone else was bitching and moaning about their ruined party, she was actually looking at me. Really looking with a kind of focused attention that made me realize she wasn't just another country club princess. Hey, she said, her voice calm but urgent as she knelt down next to me. Hey, can you hear me? I nodded, or tried to. Everything felt disconnected, Like my head was floating separately from the rest of me. I need you to try something for me, okay? Her hands were moving over my legs, checking for something I couldn't understand. Can you feel this? She pressed down on my shin, then my thigh, then my ankle. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Can you wiggle your toes for me? I tried. God, I tried so hard. I stared down at my feet, willing them to move, concentrating every ounce of energy I had left on just making my toes twitch. But it was like sending signals to a phone that had been disconnected. The message wasn't getting through. Samantha's face went white. Not pale, not concerned, white. The color drained out of her cheeks so fast. It was like watching someone pull the plug on a bathtub. Nobody touch him, she said. Her voice suddenly carrying the kind of authority that made everyone stop what they were doing. Nobody move him at all. The laughter died. Finally, blessedly, the laughter died. What's wrong with him? Tracy's voice had changed now, less irritated and more worried. Like maybe she was starting to realize this wasn't just me being dramatic. This could be spinal, Samantha said, already pulling out her phone. This could be really, really bad. Spinal? The word hung in the air like a death sentence. I knew what that meant, even through the shock and pain. I'd seen enough movies, heard enough stories. Spinal meant wheelchairs. Spinal meant never walking again. The concrete steps were still digging into my back, but I couldn't feel them anymore. Couldn't feel the warm pool water lapping at my sides. Couldn't feel my legs at all. Just dead weight. Just nothing. The shift in the air was instant. One moment, everyone was treating this like some slapstick comedy routine. And the next, Samantha's voice cut through the party chatter like a scalpel through skin. Everyone back up. Now, she wasn't asking. She was commanding. And something in her tone made even Brent shut his mouth for once. I mean it. Get away from him. Nobody touches him. Nobody moves him. Nobody does anything. I was still lying there on those concrete steps feeling like I was watching this whole scene unfold from somewhere outside my own body. The pool water was getting warmer around me. Or maybe I was just getting colder. Hard to tell when half your body has basically gone offline. Samantha was crouched next to me, her hands hovering over me, but not quite touching, like I was some kind of bomb that might go off if she made the wrong move. Her face was dead serious now, none of that polite party smile she'd been wearing earlier. What's your name? She asked me, her voice steady and professional. Everett, I managed to croak out. My voice sounded weird, like it was coming from someone else's throat. Okay, Everett. I'm Samantha. I'm a paramedic and I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're going to be okay, but I need you to stay very, very still. Can you do that for me? A paramedic? Thank God. Finally, someone who knew what the hell they were doing instead of just standing around making jokes about my pain. Can you feel this? She touched my leg again, pressing firmly against my calf. I stared down at her hand, willing myself to feel something, anything. But it was like watching someone touch a mannequin. I could see it happening, but there was no sensation, no connection between what my eyes were seeing and what my body should have been feeling. No, I whispered. Nothing. She nodded grimly and pulled out her phone. But before she could dial, Brent decided to open his big mouth again. Come on, Sam, he said with that forced laugh that meant he was starting to get nervous. It was just horseplay, guys. Probably just winded, you know? Maybe pulled a muscle or something. Horseplay. Jesus Christ. He was still calling it horseplay. Samantha didn't even look at him. Brent, I need you to shut up and step back right now. Hey, there's no need to be. There's every need. Her voice was ice cold. You just threw a grown man backward into concrete steps. He can't feel his legs. This is not horseplay. This is a medical emergency. And if you don't get out of my way so I can help him, I'm going to have you arrested for interfering with medical care. That shut him up real quick. Brent's face went from cocky to pale in about 2 seconds flat. Good. Maybe now he was starting to understand that this wasn't just another one of his stupid pranks. Tracy, on the other hand, was still in full denial mode. She came stumbling over, that cocktail still clutched in her perfectly manicured hand like it was some kind of security blanket. Samantha, don't you think you're being a little dramatic? She was using that voice, the one she used when she was trying to manage a situation without actually dealing with it. Everett's always been prone to, you know, making things seem worse than they are. He's probably just tired from work. Tired from work? Like exhaustion was what made your legs stop working. Ma'am, Samantha said without looking away from me. Your husband has suffered what appears to be significant spinal trauma. He has no sensation or movement in his lower extremities. This is not fatigue. This is not dramatics. This is a potential life-altering injury that requires immediate medical intervention. Life-altering injury. The words hit me like another punch to the gut. I knew it was bad, but hearing it spelled out like that by someone who actually knew what they were talking about made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Samantha was already dialing 911, holding the phone to her ear with one hand while keeping the other positioned near me, ready to stop anyone who might try to move me. "This is Samantha Rodriguez, off-duty paramedic," she said into the phone, her voice crisp and professional. "I need an ambulance at 1247 Oakwood Drive. Adult male, approximately 34 years old. Possible spinal cord injury following blunt force trauma to the lumbar region. Patient is conscious and alert but reports complete loss of sensation and motor function in both lower extremities." The way she talked, so calm, so precise, it was both reassuring and terrifying at the same time. Reassuring because finally someone was taking this seriously, terrifying because the clinical language made it sound even worse than I'd thought. "No, do not attempt to move the patient," she continued into the phone. Mechanism of injury was a backward fall onto concrete steps following forceful spinning motion. "Yes, I'll stay on the line." Tracy was starting to pace now, her heels clicking against the wet concrete like a metronome counting down to disaster. "This is ridiculous," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's going to be fine. He's always fine. This is just Everett being Everett." But even as she said it, I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. Maybe she was finally starting to realize that her husband lying motionless in a pool wasn't normal, even for me. Marissa was standing off to the side, arms crossed, looking like someone had just canceled Christmas. "I can't believe this is happening at my party," she said to no one in particular. "This was supposed to be perfect. Perfect, right? Because my potential paralysis was really just an inconvenience to her birthday celebration." The other guests were starting to cluster together in small groups, whispering among themselves and shooting glances in my direction. Some looked concerned, others just looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure whether they should leave or stick around for the drama. "How long for the ambulance?" I asked Samantha, surprised by how weak my voice sounded. 5 minutes, maybe less," she said, covering the phone's mouthpiece. "They're sending a full crew with spinal immobilization equipment. You're going to be okay, Everett. We're going to take good care of you." 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, this would all become real in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. In 5 minutes, the ambulance would show up and everyone would have to admit that this wasn't just me being dramatic or attention-seeking or whatever the hell they'd convinced themselves it was. I could already hear the sirens in the distance, getting louder by the second. The sound of my life changing forever, one wail at a time. The sirens got louder until they were right on top of us, then suddenly cut out, leaving this weird silence that felt heavier than all the noise that had come before. I could hear car doors slamming, radio chatter, the sound of equipment being moved around, professional voices cutting through the suburban quiet like they owned the place. First through the gate was Officer Riley. I could see his name tag when he knelt down next to Samantha. Big guy, probably in his 40s, with the kind of calm demeanor that comes from seeing too much to get rattled by anything. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, and he had that cop look in his eyes, the one that misses nothing and judges everything. "What do we have here?" he asked Samantha, but his eyes were already scanning the scene, taking in the wet concrete, the pool, the crowd of overdressed people standing around looking uncomfortable. "Adult male, spinal trauma from a fall," Samantha said, still in full professional mode. "Witnessed event. No sensation or movement below the waist." Riley nodded and pulled out a small notebook. "And you are?" "Samantha Rodriguez, paramedic with Metro West. I'm off duty, but I was here when it happened." The ambulance crew came through the gate next. 2 women in matching Navy uniforms, moving with that practiced efficiency that emergency responders get after years of dealing with other people's worst days. The older one, a black woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, knelt down beside me while her partner started unpacking equipment from a bright yellow bag. "Hi there, I'm Cassidy," she said, her voice warm but professional. "I'm going to be taking care of you today." "What's your name, sir?" "Everett," I managed. My mouth felt dry as sand and my voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Okay, Everett, can you tell me what happened here?" This was it. The moment of truth. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, Tracy, Brent, Marissa, all the party guests who'd been laughing just minutes ago. They were all waiting to see what story I'd tell. Probably hoping I'd downplay it, make it sound like an accident, keep the peace like I always did. But lying there on those concrete steps, unable to feel half my body, something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was the pain, maybe it was the fear, or maybe it was just finally having someone, several someones, who were actually listening to me instead of telling me to walk it off. "Brent picked me up and threw me," I said, the words coming out clearer and stronger than I'd expected. I told him no. I told him I didn't want to do it. He grabbed me anyway, spun me around, and threw me backward into these steps. I can't move my legs. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear Tracy's jaw drop, could feel Brent's panic radiating across the deck like heat from a fire. This wasn't the story they wanted me to tell. This wasn't me being a good sport about their family fun. Cassidy nodded calmly and looked over at Officer Riley. You getting this? Every word, he said, scribbling in his notebook. Then he looked up at the crowd. I'm going to need to speak with everyone who witnessed what happened. Nobody leaves until I've gotten statements from all of you. That's when Tracy decided to make her move. She came clicking over in those ridiculous heels, still holding that damn cocktail like it was some kind of prop. Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said in that voice she used when she was trying to charm her way out of trouble. My husband is just. He's been working a lot of double shifts lately. He's exhausted. Sometimes when he's tired, he gets a little confused, you know? Confused? She was actually trying to tell a cop that I was confused about what had just happened to my own body. Cassidy didn't even look at Tracy. She was busy checking my pupils with a small flashlight, testing my reflexes, doing all those medical things that were way over my head. Can you wiggle your toes for me, Everett? I tried. Jesus, I tried so hard. I stared down at my feet, willing them to move, concentrating every ounce of energy I had left, but it was like trying to operate a remote control with dead batteries. The signal just wasn't getting through. No, I said, and the word came out smaller than I'd intended. I can't feel them at all. Cassidy exchanged a look with her partner. One of those professional glances that said more than words ever could. Then she looked over at Officer Riley. We need to treat this as a potential assault with serious bodily injury, she said quietly. But not so quietly that I couldn't hear her. This isn't accidental trauma. Based on the patient's account and the mechanism of injury, this appears to be intentional assault. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Suddenly, this wasn't just a family incident or a party gone wrong. This was a crime scene. Brent must have heard it, too, because he started backing away from the group. Now, wait just a damn minute, he said, his voice getting higher and more defensive. It was just fooling around. Guys being guys. He's being dramatic like he always is. Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are, Officer Riley said without looking up from his notebook. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. And I'm going to need you to stop talking until I'm ready to take your statement. This is bullshit, Brent muttered, but he stopped moving. Cassidy was attaching some kind of monitoring equipment to my chest while her partner prepared what looked like a long yellow board. Everett, we're going to get you immobilized and transported to the hospital. I'm not going to lie to you, this is serious, but you're in good hands now, okay? She was radioing into dispatch, her voice professional and urgent. Unit 47 requesting police backup at current location. Suspected assault with bodily injury. Patient is a 34-year-old male with apparent spinal cord trauma following alleged physical assault. Everything stopped. The party guests, Tracy's complaining, even Marissa's birthday drama. It all just froze because those words made it official. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't horseplay. This wasn't me being dramatic. This was assault, and everyone at this fancy pool party was about to become a witness in a criminal case. Officer Riley looked up from his notebook and surveyed the crowd with those sharp cop eyes. Like I said, nobody leaves. This is now an active investigation. The blue lights from his patrol car were still flashing, casting everything in alternating shadows and harsh light, making the whole scene look surreal, like something from a TV crime show instead of a birthday party in suburbia. But it was real. Finally, terrifyingly, completely real. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens, radio chatter, and Cassidy's steady voice talking me through every bump and turn. They had me strapped to that yellow backboard tighter than a Christmas present. My head immobilized between these foam blocks that made me feel like I was trapped in some kind of medical straitjacket. Every pothole we hit sent a jolt through my body that I could feel in my upper back, but nowhere else. A constant reminder that something was seriously, fundamentally wrong with me. East Haven General looked exactly like every hospital I'd ever seen in movies, all glass and concrete and that sterile antiseptic smell that hits you the moment the ambulance doors open. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life. And I was being wheeled through those automatic doors on a gurney, staring up at fluorescent lights that seemed to stretch on forever. The ER was surprisingly quiet for a Saturday evening. Cool, efficient, with that hushed urgency that hospitals do so well. Nurses in colorful scrubs moved around like they had choreographed every step. And everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing except me. I was just cargo at this point, being transferred from one set of professionals to another like a package being delivered. They wheeled me into a room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. The walls were that hospital beige that's supposed to be calming but just makes everything feel sterile and cold. There was a clock on the wall that ticked loud enough to count off the seconds of my terror and a window that looked out onto the parking lot where normal people were living their normal lives. Dr. Neil Patterson introduced himself while the nurses were hooking me up to various machines that beeped and hummed like some kind of electronic orchestra. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with graying hair and the kind of calm bedside manner that probably took years to perfect. Everett, I'm Dr. Patterson, he said, pulling up a chair so he could sit at eye level with me. I understand you've had quite an ordeal today. The paramedics filled me in on what happened, but I'd like to hear it from you. Can you tell me about the fall? So I told him again, the whole story. Brent grabbing me, spinning me, throwing me backward onto those concrete steps, the crack I heard when I hit, the way my legs just stopped working. Dr. Patterson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his tablet, nodding in all the right places. We're going to need to get some images, he said when I finished. Starting with an MRI of your spine. I know that sounds scary, but we need to see exactly what we're dealing with before we can make any decisions about treatment. Scary didn't begin to cover it. I'd never had an MRI before, but I'd heard about them. The loud noises, the confined spaces, the way they could see inside your body and tell you things you didn't want to know. But what choice did I have? I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't move anything below my waist. I needed answers, even if those answers were going to destroy my life. The MRI machine looked like something from a science fiction movie. This huge white tunnel that hummed with barely contained energy. They slid me in there like I was being fed to some kind of technological monster. And for the next 45 minutes, I listened to sounds that belonged in a construction site, not a hospital. Banging, whirring, clicking like someone was building a house around my head. I tried not to think about what they might find. Tried not to imagine the worst case scenarios that kept playing in my head like a broken record. Wheelchair, paralysis, never walking again, never being able to work, to support myself, to be anything other than a burden. When they finally pulled me out of that machine, Dr. Patterson was waiting with another doctor. A woman this time, older with silver hair and the kind of serious expression that makes your stomach drop before anyone says a word. Everett, this is Dr. Celeste Warren, Dr. Patterson said. She's our spine specialist and she's been reviewing your images. Dr. Warren pulled up a chair on the other side of my bed and opened a tablet that showed what looked like cross-sections of my back. Black and white images that meant nothing to me, but apparently told her everything she needed to know. Everett, she said, her voice gentle but direct. You have a fresh fracture in your lumbar spine, specifically at the L2 vertebra. That's what's causing your current symptoms. A fracture? I'd broken my back. The words hit me like another fall, another crack against concrete. But Dr. Warren wasn't finished. However, that's not all we found. She swiped to different images on her tablet, pointing to areas that looked damaged, even to my untrained eye. We discovered 3 older fractures in your spine as well. L4, T9, and T11. These are old injuries, Everett. Some of them appear to be months old, possibly even years. The room started spinning. Not metaphorically, literally spinning like I was back on that pool deck being thrown around by Brent. But this was worse than being thrown. This was my entire past being rewritten in black and white medical images. Old injuries? I managed to whisper. Yes, Dr. Patterson said, leaning forward. All of these fractures show signs of repeated blunt force trauma. They're in different stages of attempted healing, which suggests they occurred at different times over an extended period. Repeated blunt force trauma. The clinical language made it sound so sterile, so objective. But I knew what it meant. All those times Brent had played with me. All those falls downstairs that Tracy said were just me being clumsy. All those times I'd hit walls or furniture during his games and been told I was being dramatic when I complained about the pain. My spine had been keeping score this whole time. Every shove, every throw, every accident that wasn't really an accident. It was all there in those MRI images, documented in bone and tissue like a medical rap sheet. The trampoline, I said suddenly, the memory hitting me like a physical blow. Last summer, Brent said we should wrestle on the trampoline. I fell off, hit the frame. Tracy said I was fine. The stairs, I continued, more memories flooding back. 3 months ago, I fell down the stairs at their house. Brent said I tripped, but he was right behind me. I couldn't sit up straight for a week. Dr. Warren and Dr. Patterson exchanged a look that I was starting to recognize. The look that meant they'd seen this before, that they knew exactly what those old fractures represented. Everett, Dr. Warren said quietly. Your spine is telling us a story, and it's not a story about accidents. The knock on my hospital room door came around 8 that evening. Just as the nurses were switching shifts and the hallway was getting that quiet, settled feeling that hospitals get after visiting hours. I was still processing everything the doctors had told me. Trying to wrap my head around the fact that my own body had been documenting years of abuse without me even realizing it. Everett? A woman's voice, professional but not unkind. I'm Detective Annika Ford with the Metro Police Department. Mind if I come in? Detective Ford was not what I'd expected. Maybe it was all those cop shows on TV, but I'd been picturing some grizzled old guy with a 5 o'clock shadow and a bad attitude. Instead, she was maybe 40, with short natural hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple black blazer and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. Officer Riley asked me to follow up on what happened at the party today, she said, pulling up the visitor's chair and settling in like she had all the time in the world. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, I said, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said all day. Except the truck's name was Brent, and apparently it's been hitting me for years. She smiled at that. Not a happy smile, but the kind of smile that said she'd heard worse stories and wasn't shocked by mine. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Everett. I've seen a lot of things. What I'm seeing here tonight is a pattern, and patterns tell stories. She pulled out a tablet and opened what looked like a video file. Before we get into the details, I want to show you something. One of the guests at the party recorded what happened. Are you up for watching it? I nodded, even though part of me didn't want to see it. Didn't want to watch my own humiliation and pain played back in high definition. But another part of me, the part that had been called dramatic and attention-seeking for years, needed to see the proof. The video was shaky, obviously shot on someone's phone, but it captured everything. There I was standing by the pool in my work clothes, clearly trying to stay out of the way. You could see me backing up when Brent approached. Could hear me saying no. Could see the exact moment when he grabbed my arm. Anyway, let's show these people some real fun. Brent's voice was crystal clear on the recording, loud and boisterous like he was performing for an audience. Then came the spin. Watching it from the outside was somehow worse than living it. I could see how helpless I looked, how completely at Brent's mercy. The way he threw me wasn't playful. It was violent, deliberate, like he was trying to hurt me and didn't care who saw it. The crack when I hit those concrete steps was audible even through the phone's tiny speaker, sharp and final like a gunshot. And then came the worst part, the laughter. So much laughter while I lay there unable to move. Stop being such a baby. Tracy's voice cut through the recording, dripping with contempt and embarrassment. You could see her in the background, rolling her eyes, more concerned about what the other guests thought than about her husband lying motionless in the pool. Detective Ford paused the video. What do you see when you watch this, Everett? I see assault, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I see my brother-in-law attacking me while my wife stood by and let it happen. That's exactly what I see, too. She made some notes on her tablet. Officer Riley told me you mentioned this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The doctors showed me your MRI results. 3 old fractures, all consistent with the kind of trauma we just watched. So I told her everything. The trampoline incident where Brent had wrestled me off the edge and I'd hit the metal frame hard enough to crack a rib, though we hadn't known it was cracked at the time because Tracy convinced me I was being dramatic about the pain. The stairs at Thanksgiving where Brent had accidentally bumped into me from behind and sent me tumbling down a full flight of concrete steps. The pool party 2 summers ago where he'd held me underwater as a joke until I nearly passed out. Every time there was an excuse. Every time it was just Brent being Brent, just family fun that went a little too far. Every time I was the one being too sensitive, too dramatic, too unable to take a joke. What about your wife? Detective Ford asked. What was her reaction to these incidents? That was the hardest part to talk about because while Brent was the one physically hurting me, Tracy was the one who made sure I never fought back, never complained, never stood up for myself. She was the one who convinced me that this was normal, that this was just how her family showed affection. She always took his side, I said. Always. If I complained about getting hurt, she'd tell me I was embarrassing her. If I tried to avoid his games, she'd say I was being antisocial. She made me feel like I was the problem for not wanting to be thrown around by her brother. Detective Ford nodded like she'd heard this story before. That's called enabling, Everett. And in some jurisdictions, it can be considered a form of abuse itself. Your wife had a duty to protect you and instead she participated in a pattern of harm that went on for years. A pattern of harm. That phrase hit me like another revelation because that's exactly what it was. Not a series of accidents or pranks gone wrong, but a deliberate, sustained campaign of violence that had been normalized and excused until I didn't even recognize it as abuse. The good news, Detective Ford continued, is that we have everything we need to make this case. The video evidence is clear and unambiguous. The medical evidence shows a documented pattern of injuries. We have witness statements from the party guests, including the paramedic who treated you. She paused and looked at me directly. Based on the evidence, we're filing charges against Brent for assault with bodily harm. Given the severity of your injuries and the pattern we've uncovered, we're also looking at charges of aggravated assault and potentially domestic violence by proxy. What about Tracy? I asked. That's more complicated, but we're building a case for spousal neglect and obstruction of justice. She actively prevented you from seeking help for previous injuries and created an environment where the abuse could continue unchecked. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, validation. Someone with authority was finally telling me that what had happened to me was wrong, that I wasn't being dramatic or oversensitive, That I deserved better than being used as entertainment by my wife's family. What happens now? I asked. Detective Ford closed her tablet and stood up. Now we make sure this never happens to you again. And we make sure Brent faces consequences for what he's done, not just today, but for years. She handed me her card. If you remember anything else, any other incidents, call me. Your spine has been keeping records, Everett. Now it's time for the legal system to do the same. The news that they'd arrested Brent hit the family like a bomb going off in a quiet neighborhood. I found out around midnight when Tracy came storming into my hospital room. Her face red with fury and her voice shaking with the kind of rage I'd seen her direct at store clerks and restaurant servers, but never quite at me. Do you have any idea what you've done? She hissed, keeping her voice low enough that the nurses wouldn't hear, but loud enough that I got the full force of her anger. They arrested my brother, Everett. They put him in handcuffs in front of the neighbors. Mrs. Henderson was outside watering her plants and saw the whole thing. Mrs. Henderson. Of course, that's what she was worried about, what the neighbors would think, how this would look to her precious social circle. Not that her husband was lying in a hospital bed with a broken spine, but that the family's reputation might take a hit. Tracy, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Don't. Just don't. This is exactly the kind of drama I should have expected from you. You couldn't just let it go, could you? Couldn't just accept that it was an accident and move on like a normal person would. An accident. Even now, even with me lying here paralyzed from the waist down, she was still calling it an accident. Like the MRI images showing years of fractures were somehow my imagination. Like the video evidence was some kind of elaborate hoax I'd staged for attention. The doctors found 3 other fractures in my spine, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. Old ones, Tracy. From all those other times your brother played with me. This isn't about one incident. This is about years of abuse that you helped cover up. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. The kind of sound that could cut glass. Abuse? Oh, that's rich. You're calling normal family roughhousing abuse now. Jesus Christ, Everett. No wonder you can't handle a real job or make real friends. You're too busy playing the victim to actually live your life. There it was. The same pattern that had kept me trapped for years, turning my pain into my failure, making my injuries into character flaws, making me the problem for getting hurt instead of addressing the person who was doing the hurting. But something was different now. Maybe it was the painkillers. Maybe it was finally having medical professionals and law enforcement take me seriously. Or maybe it was just that I'd hit rock bottom and had nowhere left to fall. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking up in a way I never had before. He threw me into concrete steps, Tracy. On purpose. And you stood there and watched it happen. You told me to walk it off when I couldn't feel my legs. What kind of wife does that? The kind of wife who's married to a man who makes everything about himself, she shot back. Do you know what this is going to do to my family? To my career? I work in public relations, Everett. How do you think it's going to look when people find out my husband is pressing charges against my brother for playing around at a family party? Her career, her family, her reputation. Not once in this entire conversation had she asked how I was feeling, whether I was in pain, what the doctors had said about my prognosis. It was all about her and how my injury was inconveniencing her life. That's when Officer Riley appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Mrs. Henderson, I need to speak with you. Tracy turned toward him with that fake smile she used on authority figures. The one that said she was a reasonable person who could surely work out any misunderstanding. Officer, I think there's been some confusion about what happened today. My husband tends to exaggerate. Ma'am, you're under investigation for spousal neglect and obstruction of justice, Riley said, cutting through her charm offensive like a knife through butter. Detective Ford has been reviewing the case and your behavior both today and over the past several years suggests a pattern of enabling abuse and preventing your husband from seeking appropriate medical care. The color drained from Tracy's face so fast I thought she might faint. That's ridiculous. I would never. You told a man with a spinal injury to walk it off, Riley continued. You dismissed his pain as attention-seeking behavior. You actively discouraged him from reporting previous injuries. That's not spousal support, ma'am. That's criminal negligence. Tracy looked at me like this was somehow my fault. Like I'd orchestrated this whole thing just to make her life difficult. Everett, tell him. Tell him I'm not. Tell him this is all a misunderstanding. But I couldn't because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was exactly what it looked like, a woman who'd spent years enabling her brother's violence against her husband because it was easier than confronting the truth about her family. The explosion came around 2 a.m. Not literally, though it felt like it, but emotionally when my phone started buzzing with text messages from Tracy's extended family. Marissa was furious that her birthday party had been ruined by my drama. Their parents were threatening to sue me for defamation. Cousins and aunts and uncles I barely knew were weighing in with their opinions about what a troublemaker I was. How I'd always been jealous of Brent, How I was tearing the family apart with my lies. The messages kept coming, each one more vicious than the last. They painted me as a manipulative, attention-seeking liar who'd fabricated years of abuse just to destroy an innocent man's life. They said I was weak, pathetic, undeserving of the Henderson family name. They said Tracy deserved better than a husband who would betray her family like this. I was drowning in their anger, suffocating under the weight of their collective denial. When I heard a knock at my door, soft, tentative, nothing like the aggressive entrance Tracy had made earlier. "Everett?" The voice was familiar, but distant, like hearing someone calling your name from the other side of a lake. "It's Talia. My sister." I hadn't seen Talia in almost 2 years. Not since Tracy had convinced me that she was jealous of our marriage and trying to cause problems between us. Looking back now, I realized that Tracy had been systematically isolating me from anyone who might have questioned what was happening to me. Talia stepped into the room cautiously, like she wasn't sure she'd be welcome. She looked older than I remembered. Her brown hair streaked with gray, worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But when she saw me lying there in that hospital bed, her face crumpled with a pain that looked almost physical. "Oh, Everett," she whispered, and suddenly she was beside my bed, taking my hand in both of hers. "I heard what happened. I came as soon as I could." "Talia," I said, and to my surprise, my voice came out cracked and broken. "I'm so sorry for everything, for staying away, for not calling, for..." "Stop," she said firmly. "You don't apologize to me. I should have tried harder to stay in touch. I should have seen what was happening. I always knew something was off about Tracy, about that whole family, but I didn't know how bad it was." She pulled her chair closer to my bed and leaned forward, her eyes intense and focused. "I want you to know something, Everett. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped worrying about you. And I never believed for 1 second that you deserved the way they treated you. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time since I'd married Tracy, someone from my family was telling me that I mattered, that I was worth protecting, that I deserved better than what I'd been getting. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I cried." The surgery came 3 days later. Dr. Warren explained it like she was talking about fixing a car engine, rods and screws and fusion procedures that would stabilize my spine and hopefully give me the best shot at walking again. Best shot being the operative phrase because nobody could promise me anything except pain and a long road to recovery. I woke up from the anesthesia feeling like I'd been hit by that same truck all over again. Except this time it had backed up and run me over a few more times for good measure. The incision in my back felt like someone had taken a blowtorch to my spine. And the drugs they gave me for the pain made everything fuzzy and distant, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the fear. Every day I'd stare down at my legs under those hospital blankets and will them to move, to twitch, to give me some sign that the surgery had worked. Some days I swore I could feel something, a tingling or a twinge. But the doctors warned me that phantom sensations were common and didn't necessarily mean anything. That's when Dr. Amelia Rojos entered my life like a drill sergeant in scrubs. She was maybe 5'0", but carried herself like she could bench press a pickup truck, with graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and the kind of direct stare that made you sit up straighter even when you were lying flat on your back. "Everett," she said on our first day. "I'm your physical therapist and I'm going to tell you something right now that might piss you off. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. There are going to be days when you want to quit, when you want to give up and accept that this is as good as it gets. But I'm not going to let you." She was right about it being hard. Jesus Christ, was she right? The first week, all we did was try to get me sitting up without passing out. My balance was shot. My core strength was non-existent. And every movement felt like my spine was being twisted with a wrench. I threw up twice the first day just from the effort of staying upright. "Your body remembers pain," Dr. Rojos would say during the sessions that left me sweating and shaking. "Now we need to teach it to remember strength." Meanwhile, Dr. Priya Jain was working on my head while Dr. Rojos worked on my body. She was younger than I'd expected for a trauma counselor, maybe 35, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that made you feel like you could tell her anything. "You weren't weak," she told me during one of our sessions. "You were systematically manipulated to believe you deserved the treatment you received. That's not weakness, Everett. That's psychological abuse. And it's just as real as the physical injuries." She helped me put words to things I'd never been able to articulate. The way Tracy would gaslight me into thinking my pain wasn't real. The way Brent's games always seemed to escalate when I tried to set boundaries. The way the whole family would close ranks and make me feel crazy for objecting to behavior that any normal person would recognize as abusive. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after surgery. I was in the physical therapy room, strapped into this contraption that was supposed to help me learn to balance again when Dr. Rojos told me to try to stand. I'd been trying to stand for weeks with no success, my legs hanging like dead weight, no matter how hard I concentrated. But something was different that day. When I focused all my energy on pushing down through my feet, I felt something. Not normal sensation, not anything close to what I used to feel, but something, a connection between my brain and my legs that hadn't been there before. Holy shit, I whispered as I managed to support some of my own weight for about 3 seconds before collapsing back into the safety harness. Dr. Rojos was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Did you feel that? I felt something, I said. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt something else, too. Hope. The courthouse was nothing like I'd expected. Maybe I'd watched too many legal dramas, but I'd pictured something grand and intimidating. Instead, it was just a regular building with fluorescent lights and worn carpet that smelled like old coffee and anxiety. But walking into that courtroom with my cane and my unsteady gait felt like walking into the most important moment of my life. Brent's lawyer was exactly what you'd expect from someone defending a rich kid's assault case: expensive suit, slicked back hair, and the kind of condescending smile that said he thought this whole thing was beneath him. During opening statements, he painted Brent as a fun-loving family man whose harmless prank had been blown out of proportion by an oversensitive brother-in-law with a history of dramatic behavior. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, gesturing toward Brent like he was showcasing a prize pupil. "This was nothing more than typical family horseplay that unfortunately resulted in an accident. My client never intended to cause harm. And the prosecution's attempt to criminalize normal sibling behavior is frankly ridiculous." Normal sibling behavior. Even in a courtroom, they were still trying to make this my fault for not being able to take a joke. But then the evidence started rolling in and their story fell apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Sandra Martinez, methodically laid out the case piece by piece. First came the video footage from the party, played on a big screen where everyone could see exactly how violent Brent's prank had been. The courtroom was dead silent as they watched me being spun and thrown like a rag doll. You could hear Brent's laughter on the recording, could see the deliberate force he used, could watch the exact moment my body slammed into those concrete steps. There was nothing playful about it. Then came Dr. Warren with the MRI images. She put up those black and white pictures of my spine on a screen and walked the jury through each fracture like she was reading a medical textbook. 3 previous fractures, all consistent with blunt force trauma. L4, T9, T11. These injuries occurred over a period of several years and show a clear pattern of repeated abuse. When it was my turn to testify, I was terrified my voice would shake or I'd stumble over my words. But as I sat in that witness chair looking out at the jury, something clicked. These people deserved to hear the truth. Not the sanitized family version, not the victim blaming I'd been fed for years, but the actual truth about what had happened to me. I told them about the trampoline incident, the stairs, the pool games that weren't really games. I explained how every injury had been dismissed. Every complaint had been turned back on me as evidence of my weakness or dramatic nature. "Brent didn't just hurt me that day at the pool," I said, my voice steady and clear. "He'd been hurting me for years, and my wife's family had been teaching me that it was my fault for not being tough enough to take it." Dr. Jane's testimony was devastating. She explained trauma bonding, gaslighting, and the psychological manipulation that keeps abuse victims trapped in cycles of violence. She made it clear that my reluctance to fight back or report previous incidents wasn't weakness. It was a predictable response to sustained psychological abuse. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they read the verdict, guilty on all counts, Brent's face went white. His lawyer immediately started talking about appeals, but the judge wasn't having it. "Mr. Henderson," Judge Patricia Monroe said, looking directly at Brent, "you have shown a pattern of violence toward your brother-in-law spanning several years. Your actions were deliberate, calculated, and resulted in serious bodily harm. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison." Tracy got 18 months probation and court-ordered counseling for enabling abuse. As they led Brent away in handcuffs, Judge Monroe's closing words echoed through the courtroom. "You mocked his pain, dismissed his suffering, and treated him as less than human. But he survived your cruelty, and now justice has been served." 18 months later, I'm standing in my own kitchen making coffee in my own apartment, and I still can't quite believe this is my life now. The place isn't much, a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood with hardwood floors that creak when I walk and windows that actually let in sunlight, but it's mine. Nobody here tells me I'm being dramatic when I need to rest my back. Nobody dismisses my pain or makes jokes about my limp. The limp is permanent, according to Dr. Warren. Some days it's barely noticeable. Other days I need the cane to get around without looking like I'm drunk. But I'm walking, against all odds. Against the initial prognosis that had me preparing for life in a wheelchair. I'm walking on my own 2 feet. The job at the Metro Men's Outreach Center started as volunteer work. Something Dr. Jane suggested to help me process my own trauma by helping others work through theirs. Turns out there are a lot of guys out there who've been told their pain doesn't matter. Who've been convinced that speaking up about abuse makes them weak or dramatic. You taught me to trust the quiet ones, Samantha told me last week when she stopped by the center. She's working as a trauma nurse now at East Haven General, and she makes a point of really listening to patients who aren't making a lot of noise about their pain. The ones who say they're fine when they're clearly not fine. You taught me that quiet doesn't mean okay. I still get emails from Tracy. She's in therapy now, court ordered at first, but she says she's continuing it voluntarily. Her messages have evolved from angry blame to something that might eventually resemble an apology, though we're not there yet. Her latest email accused me of wrecking everything by pressing charges, but there was less venom in it than before. Maybe that's progress. I don't respond to her messages anymore. Dr. Jane calls it protective boundaries, and I call it sanity. I didn't wreck anything. I just finally told the truth about what was already broken. The MRI scans are framed on my wall. Now, I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Those black and white images of my fractured spine aren't just medical records. They're proof. Proof that I wasn't making it up, wasn't being dramatic, wasn't weak for not fighting back. Every crack in those vertebrae is documentation of survival. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about the years I lost, the pain I endured, the family that threw me away rather than acknowledge what they'd done to me. The honest answer is that some days I am angry, but mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful that Samantha knew what she was looking at when I couldn't move my legs. Grateful that Dr. Warren could read the story my spine was telling. Grateful that Detective Ford believed me when I finally found the courage to speak up. I was told to walk it off, to stop being a baby, to quit making everything about me. Now I walk on my own terms, at my own pace, toward a future I'm building for myself. Every step I take is proof that they were wrong about me. My spine may have been broken, but my voice is whole now, and that makes all the difference.